Hello and welcome to this Green Grow conference. My name is Natasha Foote. I am an agri-food and health journalist with Euractiv, and I have the pleasure of moderating this two-day conference, digging deeper into food and farming systems for climate-friendly future, and more specifically, exploring the role of plant-based and organic farming in building a sustainable future. So it is increasingly clear to everyone that in the face of the current environmental and climate crises, it is imperative to make steps towards a transition for a more sustainable form of agriculture and food production. The question is, of course, how to do so. Well, a shift away from intensive animal agriculture towards a more plant-based farming system is one of the suggestions that has been put forward. So to be clear, this is not to say the future is entirely animal-less, but while it is clear that animals can bring ecological benefits to farming systems, it is also widely acknowledged that we should be mindful, or we're going to discuss in more detail, of the overconsumption and therefore overproduction of animals in our food system. So the conference is about how we can support more farmers to explore more plant-based organic farming, what this means for the environment, land, and also, of course, for the animals themselves. The question is, how can this kind of agriculture help with the vision for a greener future? How can we encourage the development and implementation of policies favoring better solutions such as plant-based organic farming? How can we share best practices and know-how on forms of agriculture to help meet climate targets in a way which also helps farmers economically sustain themselves? So over today and also tomorrow in a separate session, we will be answering these questions and more. But before we get stuck into today's conference, which is very packed and varied, we have videos, presentations, Q&As, and a couple of panel discussions. A lot going on. Let me just remind you that you can submit your questions throughout the event, and you can do so via the Q&A function on your screen. When submitting your questions, please do keep them concise, and also please specify who it is directed towards so that we can best answer your questions. Safe Advocacy Food Europe, or SAFE, will be recording this event throughout, so footage and recordings of the conference will be available afterwards to relive all the fun. And you can also follow the discussion on Twitter via the hashtag GrowGreen2021, so do feel free to contribute your comments there. And as I said, a very packed schedule today. So without further ado, let me turn to Floriana Cimmarusti, who is the Secretary General of Safe Food Advocacy Europe, followed by Louise Davies, CEO and Head of Campaigns, Policy and Research at the Vegan Society, both of which are part of today's event organisers, for some opening remarks. So let me first turn to you, Floriana. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Natasha. So good morning to everybody. I'm really happy about this conference, which finally happened, because we are trying to do this conference from June 2020. But then when in March started the COVID, we said, okay, for June 2020, we'll be finished. Of course not. So we have to move 1 year. So we said June 2021, for sure, we will be in a beautiful conference place, everybody together, but again, not, but doesn't matter. We do this conference, we're happy to have so many people today. We have around 300 people, which is amazing. We're very happy to have a lot of interest on this issue. And I would like to thank you so much, European Commission, because thanks to the Life Operating Grant, we could organize this conference. So thanks to them. Thank you so much to SAFE members, because a lot of SAFE members help us, support us to really organize this event today. So, farm to fork strategy. I would like just to highlight one sentence is in the farm to fork strategy. So moving to a more plant-based diet will reduce disease and will give a positive environmental impact on the food system. So it means that we all, as consumers, we have to try to move forward a plant-based diet. It doesn't mean that we never have to eat animal protein, but just you have to reduce the amount of meat we eat, and we have to go more on a plant-based diet, having certain days a week or switch to that. And this is what the Farm to Fork suggests to us, and it's interesting to realize that. but then view the environmental and climate crisis step for a transition to sustainable forms of agriculture, we believe that it's important to inform the European decision maker of all benefits of moving towards plant-based and organic agriculture. That's why we are here today. So today, actually, we will try to talk about how redesign our food system. And we will have a lot of extraordinary speakers. I thank all of them already. We have amazing speakers today. I'm very proud of this. I'm very happy. And then tomorrow is more the practical part. We will have example of plant-based agriculture. So what do we wish out of this conference? We really wish that the EU will support for the future plant-based organic agriculture, creating a food environment that is beneficial for farmers. It is important that for farmers, they could have the idea that out of plant-based agriculture, they could have even a business. It's not that if there are no animals, there is not a farms and there is not a business, but the idea that it could even be a possible business. This is what I hope after this conference could come as a global idea. So thank you so much. Natasha, I will pass the floor. Is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Floriana. Louise, I'll now pass you the floor for your opening remarks.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us for this important conference. I'm Louise Davies, the Chief Executive of the Vegan Society, and we're delighted to be sponsoring the event. We're the world's oldest vegan organisation, and we even coined the term vegan. We work to promote the benefits of vegan lifestyles for various reasons, for public health, for the environment, and of course for animals. And as part of that, we promote the benefits of plant-based diets. As part of our work, we run a campaign called Grow Green, hence the name of this conference, which makes the case for a shift away from animal agriculture and towards plant-based farming. As Floriana said, this event has been almost 2 years in the making. We held a similar conference in London in 2019, and immediately afterwards thought how beneficial it would be to bring this conversation to Europe. And I can't thank our friends at SAFE enough for bringing this to fruition, despite the twists and turns of the last 18 months. The climate crisis is not news for anyone here, and neither, I suspect, is the crisis in agriculture. We hear frequently about the impact of climate and soils on farming in the EU and the need for carbon sequestration. We believe, as did the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, that producing more sustainably produced plant-based foods can form part of the solution to these problems. And there are some, admittedly very small, signs of progress to address this. The Farm to Fork strategy notes that consumption of whole grain cereals, fruits and vegetables, legumes and nuts is insufficient. And it also notes that 70% of emissions from agriculture come from the animal farming sector. But some frustrating elements exist within EU agriculture policy, like the current focus on more legumes and pulses grown in the EU as animal feed. This is intended to reduce the climate and ecological impact of animal feed imports, but it has the perverse effect of incentivizing feed crop production over human edible crops. We know that pulses consumed directly are so much less carbon intensive and deliver so much more human nutrition per hectare of cropland than those used in animal feed. But we've got a bizarre situation where a farmer in Germany could receive additional subsidy support for growing beans to feed to cows, but not beans to feed to people. So there are basic issues with the farming incentive structure that need to be addressed, and ways in which the EU agriculture budget and policy is clearly working against itself and against its climate goals. Removing these contradictions is essential for us to take the next step in the direction of a climate-friendly food system. And there's also scope to go further, supporting innovation in a sustainable plant-based food and farming sector through more targeted funding for startups, better targeting of eco schemes towards plant-based farming, and explicit support for the most sustainable forms of plant-based production, such as the vegan organic farming techniques we're going to hear about today and tomorrow. So I look forward to hearing more about this potential from our speakers here today. Thank you again to the team at SAFE, Floriana and Antoine. Your support for this crucial topic is much appreciated. And thank you all for joining the event, and I hope we can all work together for a more sustainable farming future in Europe.
Thank you very much, Louise. I think between Floriana and between you, a very comprehensive overview, contradictions, opportunities that's on offer. So excited to kick off kick off this conference today. And so I'd now like to welcome Green MEP Eleonora Evi, who is a member of a number of the European Parliament's committees, such as the ENVI Committee and the ANIC Committee, which you might know as the Inquiry Committee on the Protection of Animals During Transport. She's also the Vice Chair of the Animal Welfare Intergroup of the European Parliament, therefore very well placed to kick us off today for our keynote speech. So Eleonora, welcome to the conference and the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Natasha. Thanks a lot for inviting me to this very important conference. I'm sure it will be inspiring and giving a lot of good examples on how we have to move and shift towards a truly sustainable agriculture. And we can do that because we have already a lot of examples and solutions to definitely move from the situation that we are today. Because if today we have to take a snapshot of our current food system, we would be frightened by what we would see and puzzled as to why we are doing. The way we produce and consume our food is fueling climate change, which is a climate crisis, and the biodiversity loss, which is a nature crisis, which in turn are threatening our food security. And we are compromising our planet and destroying the natural resources on which we rely to produce food. But at the same time, we are failing to achieve what should be the main objective of our food system, which is feeding the world's population. And talking about world population, the main message here is that inequality is still the adjective that the word that better describes the situation, where we have now 2 billion people across the globe, which is overweight, and the number is increasing dramatically. And at the same time, we have 820 million people undernourished. This is so unacceptable. And at present, food systems are responsible for 70% of water extracted from nature, generate up to 1/3 of the total human greenhouse gas emissions, and cause 60% of biodiversity loss. They are causing a major environmental and human health problems such as water and air pollution, depleted soils, and the loss of forests and the species that call them home. Agriculture and related land use change cause over 70% of tropical deforestation through its consumption of commodities like meat, dairy, soy for animal feed, palm oil, coffee, and cacao. The EU alone is responsible for over 10% of forest destruction. So it's us having this big role in the 10% deforestation globally. And animal agriculture is without any doubt the most damaging. The UN estimates that it is responsible for approximately 18% of the global greenhouse gas emissions, which is more than the entire transportation sectors. There are other estimations that also gives higher numbers. And it is certainly the biggest contributor to greenhouse gas emissions caused by the food system, with livestock and their byproducts account for at least 32,000 million tons of CO2 per year. And if we only look at the European Union, livestock farming accounts for 70% of the entire greenhouse gas emissions of the agriculture sector, as has been recalled. The UN estimates that more than 1/3 of the world's land surface and almost 75% of freshwater resources are now devoted to crop or livestock production. And our current overconsumption and overproduction of animal products and our intensive livestock production practices are posing a severe threat to public health as well. Not only because they are responsible for the outbreak of zoonosis, but also because they make these viruses much harder to fight, and their health effects are even more severe. Why and how? By destroying diversity and biodiversity of wildlife habitats to turn them into farmland. Factory farming increases the chances of wild animals coming into contact with livestock, and as a consequence of pathogens spillover. By keeping animals in dark, unsanitary, overcrowded factory farms, which stresses their immune systems, and by breeding animals that are genetically very similar, the goal here is, of course, a rapid growth and a maximum output, and not resilience. They make them especially likely to transmit disease to one another. And in addition to this, the overuse of antibiotics has caused antimicrobial resistance in both humans and animals. And also another point here, which is very unacceptable, is the amount of food that we produce that in the end become waste. Another thing that is completely unacceptable, as I said. And it is crystal clear that we cannot continue on this path. A radical transformative change is required, especially with a rapidly growing global population, which will reach 9 or 10 billion by 2050, and which it becomes wealthier and tends to adopt more resource-intensive diets. The good news is that solutions for the shift to a sustainable agriculture and food security do not need to be invented, as they are already there and ready to be scaled up. Sustainable agriculture that works with nature and not against it, it already exists. Food productions that use a limited amount of resources can feed the entire global population are already there. And we need to stop fooling ourselves thinking that the ultimate solution resides in the use of technology to solve every problem. This is simply not real. Technology to make conventional agriculture more sustainable, it's not the solution, because we are running out of time. And instead, we need to support the agriculture models that are already delivering environmental, climate, and health benefits. And in these 2 days of this conference, it will explain this is certainly the case for the plant-based organic farming. An ambitious transition from conventional to organic farming and a drastic reduction of our consumption and production of meat and dairy in favor of locally produced protein crops would allow us to ease the pressure of our food system on the environment and our climate, as well as on our health. And such a shift would allow us also to contribute to fighting climate change. Greenpeace, by the way, estimates that if we want to be in line with the Paris Agreement, meat consumption in the European Union should drop by 71% by 2030 and by 81% by 2050. We can also save lives. Unhealthy diets are now the leading cause of death and disease worldwide, and eating more plants and fewer animal products could prevent millions of premature deaths every year from heart disease, diabetes, and other chronic conditions every year. And according to researchers, adopting vegan diets could save up to 8.1 million deaths every year. And these numbers are incredible. Minimizing agricultural land use, we can do that. Research suggests that if everyone shifted to a plant-based diet, we would reduce global land use for agriculture by 75%. And this large reduction of agricultural land use would be possible thanks to a reduction in land use for grazing and smaller need for land to grow crops. And another main point is also we can save water. Research also shows that switching to a more plant-forward diets could cut our water footprint in half and alleviate world hunger. As I was saying at the beginning, more than 820 million people around the world lack sufficient food. At the same time, the 2/3 of all the soybeans, maize, barley, and about 1/3 of all grains are used to feed animals. If we stop feeding so much nutritious grains and eatable food to farmed animals instead of humans, and free up land used for animal production or animal feed for the production of plant-based food to humans, we will be able to feed a significant larger portion of the world's population. So if the solution for a sustainable agriculture and food system are straightforward, what is lacking are adequate policies and incentives for such a transformation. If on one side, we have the farm to fork strategy that represented a good step in the right direction, it risks to be completely undermined by the current reform of the Common Agricultural Policy, which risks continuing continuing financing intensive agriculture and the overproduction of animal products instead of favoring the ecological transition of agricultural sector. If on one hand we are finally starting to talk about the promotion of plant-based diets, on the other hand, we continue to finance with taxpayer money promotion campaigns to encourage the consumption of beef. This is completely unacceptable. So if you wanted to also be coherent and bold and brave, we also have to put some targets in order to really reduce the amount of meat and animal products produced and consumed by European Union. For example, I mean, European Union works with targets. We have targets for reducing our greenhouse gas emissions. We have targets for waste. We have targets for reduction of pesticides, for example. We're gonna get there. We need to be coherent and consistent, and finally introduce targets also to reduce the animal product production and consumption in Europe. And if this manage to bridge this gap and build the necessary political support to this transition, we will be able to finally unlock the full potential of plant-based organic farming and building safer, sustainable food system with which we can meet our climate and biodiversity goals. And more generally, we will make possible for agriculture to become a factor of mitigation and adaptation to climate change and support the biodiversity conservation, the two biggest crises we are facing in this moment, while also, of course, improving livelihoods and safeguarding human health. I hope really, to my heart, I really hope that this conference will contribute to bring us one step closer to this result. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Eleonora. Another amazing comprehensive overview of all of these problems, from food waste, inequality, deforestation, human health. I mean, absolute range there. So thank you very much for that.